Lewis hesitated. That day, when he forced you down, how did you stay calm? Coleman's eyes softened. I've faced discrimination my whole life. You learn to keep your dignity. Anger would have given him power. What mattered was turning humiliation into reform, not revenge. Lewis nodded, inspired. I want to fight cases like mine. Defend people who never had a chance. You'll be an asset to the law, Coleman said warmly. Justice needs people who've lived its failures. Later that afternoon, Coleman entered his courtroom. Sunlight slanted through tall windows. The staff moved with quiet professionalism. At the witness stand, a young officer testified in his first case. His body camera gleamed on his chest. His words were precise, unbiased. Coleman studied the scene, small shifts, meaningful progress. Justice, he thought, isn't just punishing wrongs. It's building systems where right action becomes the natural choice. The gavel fell. The court was in session. What happened here wasn't just about one officer, it was about changing a system. If this story left you thinking, smash the like button and share it so more people see it. Subscribe for weekly stories that challenge power and inspire justice. And tell us in the comments, do you believe real reform is possible? Me? Reddick barked. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Coleman opened a folder. 16 excessive force complaints. 92% of your drug arrests involved minorities. 43% of your evidence submissions had documentation irregularities. Reddick froze. Where did you get that? I've had it for weeks, Coleman revealed. I'm not just a recently transferred judge. I chair the Judicial Oversight Committee on Discriminatory Policing Practices. Your name has come up repeatedly. Color drained from Reddick's face. This is a witch hunt. No, Coleman said, removing his glasses. This is accountability. A knock interrupted. The bailiff entered with Chief Judge Kane and Commissioner Ruth Delgado. Delgado's uniform was crisp, her expression grim. Officer, you are suspended pending investigation. On what grounds? Assaulting a judge, falsifying testimony, potential evidence tampering. You can't. 20 years of service makes it worse, Delgado cut him off. You should know better. Coleman added, this morning you physically assaulted me, used racial intimidation, and tried to humiliate me publicly. I'm requesting formal charges. Delgado nodded. Already in motion. Reddick laughed bitterly. So 20 years down the drain because you got your feelings hurt? No, Coleman said firmly. 20 years down the drain because you abused your authority and thought you'd never face consequences. That ends today. Delgado stepped forward. Surrender your badge and weapon. Report to Internal Affairs tomorrow. Reddick's shoulders sagged. His defiance cracked into defeat. As they escorted him out, he whispered to Coleman, you have no idea who you're messing with. By noon, courthouse security footage of Officer Mark Reddick forcing Judge David Coleman to his knees was already online. Within hours, hashtags trended across social media, #JudgeInHisKnees, #AccountabilityNow. Cable news ran the clip on rotation. The incident exploded into a national story. At the police union headquarters, panic reigned. We need to distance ourselves, said Union President Frank Taylor, tossing his pen on the table. That video is indefensible. Vice President Harding shook his head. If we abandon our members, morale tanks. We stand by officers. Taylor snapped back. He slapped a judge and lied under oath on camera. You think the public buys stress as an excuse? The room descended into heated debate, mental health defenses, procedural spin, silence campaigns. But every option sounded hollow. Meanwhile, Laura Grant rubbed her temples in the district attorney's office as stacks of files landed on her desk. Defense attorneys are flooding us, her deputy warned. Every case involving Reddick is under review. We're talking hundreds, maybe thousands. Grant sighed. Prioritize the ones with people still in prison. Pull every case file. We'll form a review committee, and the Lewis charges, drop them immediately. That evening, Judge Coleman met with the Judicial Oversight Committee. 12 judges from across the state gathered in a rain-slicked conference room. What happened to you is appalling, Judge Garcia said, but it gives us leverage for real reform. Coleman nodded. I don't want one badge revoked. I want systemic change. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. The commissioner has agreed to independent review of training protocols. City Council is drafting a bill requiring body cameras with automatic uploads to court servers. Coleman asked, "And the mayor?" Chief Judge Marjorie Kane answered, "She's rattled. Community leaders are pressing her hard. She'll back us." At police headquarters, Commissioner Ruth Delgado addressed a room of precinct captains. Her voice was steady, unflinching. "Officer Reddick didn't form these attitudes in a vacuum," she said. "Supervisors ignored red flags. Partners stayed silent. That ends now." Graphs lit up a projector screen, statistics on racial disparities in stops, searches, and use of force. "The pattern is undeniable," Delgado continued. Judge Coleman's humiliation put a face to what the numbers already showed. Some captains shifted uncomfortably. Others stared grimly at the evidence. In his home, Reddick sat slumped in his recliner. The television replayed his downfall on mute again and again. His phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, union reps, angry messages. A few colleagues came by. When his former partner, Officer Wilson, finally arrived, Reddick poured himself another drink. "They're making me the fall guy for standard procedure," Reddick muttered, "like you never profiled a suspect." Wilson's face tightened. "They interviewed me today about the Martinez arrest. I told them the truth." "The truth?" Reddick barked. "That we did everything by the book." Wilson shook his head slowly. "That we didn't. I've got a family. A pension. I'm not going down with you." Reddick stared in disbelief as his last ally walked out. Next morning, Judge Coleman presided over a special hearing for Andre Lewis. The gallery overflowed with reporters and community members. In light of evidence suggesting improper procedures and falsified testimony, Coleman declared, "The charges against Mr. Lewis are dismissed." Lewis, barely 21, broke down in tears. His mother clutched him tightly. Hope filled the room. Coleman continued, "Furthermore, this court orders a review of all cases involving Officer Reddick." As he left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. "Judge Coleman, will you pursue personal charges?" "This isn't about me or one officer," Coleman told the microphones. "It's about equal justice under law. The system failed. Now it must change." "Do you forgive him?" a reporter shouted. Coleman paused. "Forgiveness isn't the point. Accountability is." In the weeks that followed, reforms swept through the district. Mandatory body cameras with tamper-proof uploads. Civilian oversight boards with enforcement powers. Statistical monitoring of arrest patterns for racial bias. New training protocols emphasizing de-escalation and cultural awareness. Complaints of excessive force dropped by 40% in just 3 months. Conviction rates remained stable, proving justice could be effective and fair. At the police academy graduation, Commissioner Delgado addressed the recruits. "You're entering law enforcement at a pivotal moment. Old ways are gone. Your generation decides whether these changes last." Each cadet recited a new oath: equal treatment regardless of race, gender, or status. Some veterans resigned in protest, but many adapted. Body camera malfunctions dropped to near zero. Community meetings, once hostile, now brimmed with cautious hope. 3 months later, Officer Mark Reddick sat before the police disciplinary board. His uniform hung loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Commissioner Delgado presided, flanked by senior officers and a civilian representative. "Officer Reddick," she said, "you face charges of assault, perjury, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," his hollow voice replied. Captain Hernandez of Internal Affairs presented damning data: disproportionate force against minorities, procedural irregularities, and the infamous courtroom footage. When asked to explain, Reddick said, "I acted on instinct. I saw someone out of place at the defense table. In today's climate, I moved to protect the court." Delgado leaned forward. "By slapping him and forcing him to kneel?" Reddick stammered, "I perceived resistance." "And your remarks about certain groups committing more crimes?" Silence. After hours of testimony, the board deliberated. When Reddick returned, Delgado read the verdict. "This board finds overwhelming evidence of misconduct and abuse of authority. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Pension revoked. Criminal charges will proceed." Reddick's face barely moved. "I served this city 20 years. No, Delgado corrected him. You served yourself while wearing our badge. He turned in his gun and shield, walking out past reporters and colleagues who watched in silence. Judge Coleman addressed the National Conference of State Courts. Hundreds of officials filled the auditorium. Cameras streamed live. The Reddick incident wasn't about one officer, Coleman said, voice resonant. It exposed cracks throughout our justice system. In the past 90 days, excessive force complaints in my district have dropped 42%. Conviction rates remain steady. Reform works. Slides behind him showed new policies, oversight boards, cultural training, and independent data audits. Commissioner Delgado nodded from the audience. Beside her sat Laura Grant, now head of a newly formed Civil Rights Division. These reforms succeeded, Coleman continued, because leaders across agencies chose accountability over silence. Real justice requires all of us, police, prosecutors, judges, and citizens. Weeks later, Coleman sat in chambers reviewing files. A knock at the door revealed Andre Lewis, now dressed in a suit, a law textbook under his arm. Your Honor, Lewis said shyly, thank you for seeing me. I'm preparing for law school. I wanted your perspective on the reforms. Coleman smiled. Statistics show progress, but culture is harder to measure. Change takes constant vigilance. There we go, Reddick said with satisfaction. Now gather your things and get out of my courtroom. Grant stepped forward. Mark, for God's sake. Doing my job, Reddick snapped. He reached for Coleman's arm as the judge slipped a hand into his jacket. Hands where I can see them, Reddick barked, twisting Coleman's wrist. I'm reaching for identification, Coleman said calmly through clenched teeth. Sure you are. With practice force, Reddick pinned his arm behind his back. Obstruction of justice. Resisting an officer, bailiff, cuff him. The bailiff froze, torn between commands. The courtroom was silent, waiting for catastrophe. Then an authoritative voice cut through the chaos. What time is it, Mr. Harper? The court clerk stammered, checking his watch. 9:07, Your Honor. Every head turned. Chief Judge Marjorie Kane stood at the judicial entrance, her silver hair shining under the lights, her black robes radiating authority. Release that man immediately, officer, she commanded. Reddick hesitated. That individual, she continued, her voice ablaze, is Judge David Coleman. He is presiding over this case. Color drained from Reddick's face. Coleman rose smoothly, straightening his tie, silent and dignified. Judge Coleman, Kane said softly, do you require a recess? He shook his head. That won't be necessary, Chief Judge. Thank you. Kane's eyes hardened at Reddick. I expect a full report on this incident, she exited, leaving the courtroom frozen in disbelief. Coleman gestured to the bailiff. 10-minute recess. Officer Reddick remains here. Then he walked calmly toward the chambers, his hand trembling only once he was alone. This case is heating up fast. Do you think Officer Reddick will face justice or escape accountability like so many before him? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. I read every one of them. And if you're new here, subscribing helps us bring more real stories of justice and reform straight to you. Judge David Coleman shut his chamber door and finally let his breath out in a slow tremor. His hands shook faintly as he placed the briefcase back on his desk. The weight of what had just happened pressed against his chest like an iron plate. But he steadied himself. He had faced worse. Law school debates where professors dismissed him. Courtrooms where juries doubted him. Promotions are delayed for reasons never spoken of but always understood. This wasn't about him. It never was. He picked up the phone. Gerald, it's Coleman. Pull everything you can on Officer Mark Reddick. Priority. He hung up before doubt could creep in. Moments later, the bailiff knocked. Your Honor, should I call someone? Coleman raised a hand. I'm fine, but contact Internal Affairs quietly. Every arrest record, especially those involving minority suspects, and have courthouse security preserve today's footage. Yes, sir. Coleman then retrieved his judicial robe from the closet. He slid it over his shoulders, feeling its weight settle him. He looked in the mirror. The same face that Reddick had treated with contempt now framed in authority. This isn't about you, David, he whispered. It's about everyone who couldn't fight back. He squared his collar, opened the door, and returned to the courtroom. The atmosphere shifted instantly as Judge Coleman ascended the bench. Silence fell over the gallery. Officer Reddick now sat stiffly at the prosecution table, his jaw tight, sweat at his hairline. Coleman struck the gavel once. Court is now in session. State of Westlake versus Andre Lewis, possession with intent to distribute. He carried on as though nothing unusual had occurred. The regular rhythms of the law cloaked the earlier chaos, though the energy in the room was electric. When it came time for testimony, Coleman looked directly at Reddick. "Officer, you are sworn to tell the truth in this courtroom. Do you understand that obligation?" Reddick swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." "Proceed with your account of the defendant's arrest." Reddick began, his usual confidence dulled. He described pulling Lewis over for a broken taillight and discovering narcotics in the vehicle. Coleman scribbled notes with deliberate calm. "You stopped the vehicle for what reason again?" "Broken taillight, Your Honor." "Was the dash camera functioning during this stop?" Reddick hesitated. "There was an equipment malfunction that day." Coleman raised an eyebrow. "And your body camera, also malfunctioning?" "Yes, sir, unfortunately." The defense attorney, a wiry man named Samuel Ortiz, perked up. "Your Honor, cross-examination?" "Proceed," Coleman said, eyes narrowing slightly. Ortiz rose with a stack of papers. "Officer Reddick, how many of your recent arrests involved camera malfunctions?" "Objection," Delora Grant interjected. "Relevance." "Goes to pattern and credibility, Your Honor," Ortiz counted. Coleman considered, then nodded. "Overruled. The officer will answer." Reddick's jaw tightened. "I don't keep track of equipment issues." "Let me rephrase," Ortiz pressed. "How many of your arrests of minority suspects involved equipment malfunctions?" The gallery stirred. Grant stood again. "Your Honor, the defense is fishing for racial implications without foundation." Coleman leaned forward. "Miss Grant, questioning the reliability of evidence-gathering equipment is not only appropriate, it is essential." "The objection is overruled," Reddick interrupted, stepping toward the bench uninvited. "This is harassment. I've testified in hundreds of cases." Coleman's voice cut like glass. "Officer, approach when called, not before. Return to your seat." "With all due respect, Your Honor." Coleman's tone hardened. "Step back immediately or face contempt charges." For 3 tense seconds, Reddick held his ground before retreating. His muttered words carried across the silence. "What was that, officer?" Coleman asked. "Nothing, Your Honor." "Speak clearly for the record." Reddick met his gaze. "I said this feels personal." A ripple of whispers spread through the gallery. Coleman leaned forward, his voice low but resonant. "Justice is always personal, to the accused, to the victim, and to society. What it must never be is prejudiced." He turned back to Ortiz. "Continue." Ortiz retrieved a report. "Officer, are you aware that 78% of your drug arrests in the last 3 years involved Black or Latino suspects, despite those groups making up less than a quarter of the district's population?" Grant shot to her feet. "Objection. These statistics are unauthenticated." "They were submitted in discovery," Ortiz counted. Coleman examined the papers. "I'll allow the question." Reddick flushed crimson. "I go where the crime is." "So you deny any racial bias in your arrests?" "I arrest criminals, period. If certain groups commit more crimes." The gallery erupted in murmurs. The defendant's mother covered her mouth. Coleman's gavel struck sharply. "Order." The room quieted, but Reddick's words hung heavy in the air. Ortiz gestured toward his assistant, who wheeled in a small screen. "Your Honor, with permission, I'd like to present video evidence." Coleman nodded. The grainy footage rolled, a security camera across the street. It showed Reddick rifling through the defendant's car before issuing traffic citations. Grant leapt up. "Objection, this footage was not provided." "We obtained it independently last week," Ortiz explained. "The department claimed no video existed." Coleman's eyes sharpened. "Miss Grant, were you aware of this?" "No, Your Honor," she admitted. Coleman turned to Reddick. "You testified under oath that the broken taillight prompted the search. This video suggests otherwise." "With all due respect," Reddick snapped, "a distant camera doesn't show context." "What context would justify contradicting your sworn testimony?" Coleman asked evenly. The defendant, Andre Lewis, leaned forward, hope flickering across his face. Reddick suddenly stood, finger pointing at Coleman. You've been gunning for me since I walked in here." Coleman's voice thundered. "Officer Reddick, you are in contempt. This whole trial is a setup," Reddick shouted. "You tricked me, pretended to be some nobody at the defense table." "I never pretended," Coleman replied coldly. "You assumed based on what you saw." "Don't twist this. You misled me by being," Reddick faltered, "by being who you are." Coleman's calm cracked. "By being black in a courthouse?" The room froze. "Bailiff," Coleman said softly, "remove Officer Reddick." The bailiff approached cautiously. Grant urgently whispered, "Your Honor, request a recess." Coleman struck the gavel. "Granted. 15 minutes." Then he fixed his gaze on Reddick. "Officer, in my chambers. Now." Reddick paced like a caged animal, tie loosened, veins bulging at his temple. "You compromised this entire case," Coleman said, voice level. "Know your place, boy." Officer Mark Reddick's palm cracked across the man's cheek like a pistol shot. The sound ricocheted through the hushed courtroom. Gasps rose, paper rustled, and every head in the gallery turned toward the defense table where the incident had just unfolded. A red mark spread across the black man's face. His jaw tightened, but his eyes remained steady. Coffee steam drifted between him and the officer. "This table's for real lawyers, not janitors," Reddick sneered, snatching the man's briefcase off the polished oak. He swept it to the floor. Papers scattered like startled birds, legal documents, court files, and a single framed photo that slid under a bench. The man inhaled deeply, as if centering himself. "Pick that up," Reddick ordered, his voice dropping into a dangerous growl. The gallery froze. A clerk covered her mouth. The bailiff's hand hovered near his radio, but hesitated. The black man rose slowly. He straightened his tie, ignoring the sting on his face, and walked, not to the gallery, but toward the judge's bench. Every eye tracked him as he climbed the steps and reached for the gavel. Before we dive deeper into this shocking courtroom drama, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss stories like this one. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Judge Coleman's shoes? Hours earlier, Officer Mark Reddick strode through courthouse security without breaking pace. His badge was a shield, parting the crowd like a shark fin through water. 2 decades on the force had honed his swagger into something that demanded recognition. The marble hallway amplified each bootstep. Morning light sliced through towering windows, turning dust motes into slow-moving galaxies. "Morning, Laura," he called to District Attorney Laura Grant, who was standing near the coffee cart, eyes fixed on her notes. He plucked a steaming cup without paying. "You ready to lock up another dealer?" he smirked. Her professional smile was tight. "Possession, not distribution, and Judge Coleman is presiding." Reddick paused mid-sip. "Coleman? Never heard of him." "Transferred from Eastern Circuit last month," Grant explained, choosing her words carefully. "Reputation for being extremely thorough with police testimony." Reddick scoffed. "As long as he knows which end of the gavel to swing, we're good. My testimony's bulletproof." Grant lowered her voice. "Just keep it professional. He doesn't appreciate theatrics." In a quiet corridor, Judge David Coleman reviewed files with disciplined focus. At 52, he carried himself with understated authority, with closely cropped salt and pepper hair and a precise, no-frills suit. He had been a prosecutor for 20 years before taking the bench. Now recently assigned to this district after repeated reports of racial profiling and misconduct, Coleman walked deliberately through the public entrance of Courtroom 7B. It was a habit of his, a civilian walkthrough. He wanted to see how courthouse personnel treated strangers before they realized who he was. The bailiff barely glanced up when Coleman entered. 2 uniformed officers by the door snickered as he passed, their smirks heavy with dismissal. Coleman noted it quietly, setting his briefcase at the defense table. Reddick spotted him immediately. Something about the man's calm posture, the careful way he organized papers, annoyed him. The suit was of decent quality but understated, not flashy enough for a high-priced attorney. "Court starts in 15, Reddick roared, approaching. "Defense table are for attorneys only." Coleman didn't look up. "I'm aware of the schedule, thank you." Reddick planted himself before the table, shadow falling across the documents. "You're not hearing me. This area is restricted." Coleman lifted his gaze at last. "I am authorized to be here." "Let me see some ID." "That won't be necessary." Grant edged closer, her voice urgent. Mark, we should prepare. 1 second, Laura. He waved her off, eyes locked on Coleman. Last chance, buddy. Move to the gallery or show credentials. Coleman stood, his height matching Reddick's. Officer, I suggest you focus on your testimony rather than seating arrangements. Suspicion narrowed Reddick's eyes. How do you know I'm an officer? His hand brushed instinctively near his holster. Your badge is visible, Coleman replied evenly, and you carry yourself with the arrogance I've seen in many officers. Grant inhaled sharply. Mark, let's go. But Reddick ignored her, stepping closer until inches separated them. You got something against law enforcement, friend? Coleman did not move. I have something against anyone who misuses authority. The air thickened. The courtroom clerk slipped out quickly to alert security. You know what? I don't have time for this, Reddick said, yanking Coleman's briefcase across the table. The latch snapped. Papers burst outward, briefs, notes, and the same family photo that skidded across the floor. Officer Reddick, Grant hissed. Coleman remained unnervingly calm. You're interfering with court documents. Court documents? Reddick scoffed, scattering papers with his boot. And I'm the Attorney General. He kicked the photo, sending it sliding beneath a bench. Pick those up, he ordered. Coleman didn't move. You don't get to say no to me. Reddick shoved a finger at him. I said pick them up. The gallery whispered. Someone began recording on their phone. When Coleman refused, Reddick grabbed his shoulder, forcing him down. I said kneel. Gasps rippled across the room. Coleman resisted, but Reddick pressed harder until the man dropped to one knee.